Asia sees a new surge in virus cases. Hong Kong and South Korea are reimposing restrictions as new classes emerge. Malaysia's Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin passes his toughest test yet. Parliament approves his budget for next year. Stay masked and stay safe. Collection of the new Mask Fit Pro Shield, available in 4 sizes, starts from Monday. It's 5:30 p.m. here in Singapore. You're watching The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Haryanto Diman. Now you can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. We begin with the latest COVID-19 situation in Singapore. One new COVID-19 case in the community among the 5 cases confirmed today. This ends a 15-day stretch of no new local infections. The Health Ministry said there were no new cases from workers' dormitories, and the remaining 4 patients were imported cases which had been placed on stay-home notices when they arrived here. More details will be released tonight. In other local headlines, you can collect more reusable masks from Monday when Temasek Foundation launches its 3rd nationwide mask distribution exercise. All Singapore residents can collect 1 free mask kit which contains 2 black masks and 3 reusable filters. The masks come in 4 sizes and can be found at over 800 locations, including bus interchanges and community centres. The collection exercise ends on December 13. According to a new report released by the Finance Ministry, Singaporeans' incomes grew in 2019 while income inequality fell. Full-time employed residents saw their incomes rise 3.8% per year over the past 5 years. For the first time in 5 years, Singapore's Gini coefficient, a measure of income inequality, dipped below 0.4. The Singapore Public Sector Outcomes Review also showed Singapore remains one of the most competitive economies globally. The Economic Development Board secured $13 billion of fixed asset investment commitments in the first 4 months of 2020, among the highest in recent years. 6 people who took part in an illegal gathering on Lazarus Island were fined $3,000 each for breaking COVID-19 laws. The 5 British nationals and 1 Singaporean pleaded guilty to an offence under the COVID-19 Temporary Measures Act. They were among a group of 12 who had visited the island on August 8th and posted photos of their trip on Instagram. One member of the group was fined $3,000 in October, while the cases for the remaining 5 are still pending. Across the causeway, Malaysian Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin's first ever federal budget has survived a parliament vote. The supply bill was passed with a voice vote this afternoon based on lawmakers verbally indicating whether they support the budget. It will now move to a 3-week-long committee stage of debates before a 3rd and final reading is approved. At over 320 billion ringgit, the budget is Malaysia's largest to date. Now here's Malaysia Bureau Chief Shannon Teo with more from Kuala Lumpur.
So Muhyiddin's budget has been passed today at the 2nd reading, one might add. So what this means is that at the policy level, MPs have agreed and approved this budget. Now it will go through a committee stage, which means further debates on more finer details in terms of what is allocated to each ministry and so on and so forth. This will last for the next 3 weeks before the 3rd and final reading on December 15th, and they'll take another vote there. Now, of course, you can defeat the budget at the 3rd reading, or you can kind of ambush the government at committee stage. But largely, this is unprecedented, not conventional. If you have agreed to the budget at policy level, then you would debate and ask for small tweaks at the committee stage, but you would probably not defeat it at the 3rd reading unless you have a very good explanation for it. So that's where we are with the budget. Now, where this leaves the Prime Minister, well, it is one would consider it a triumph for him, despite all the noise we've had over the past 3 weeks or so about MPs, even from his own coalition, especially from UMNO, which is his largest partner, that they might want to defeat the budget, that they are unhappy with certain allocations, or in fact unhappy with the government and how they've perceived to have sidelined UMNO. All this did not materialize. And in fact, even for the opposition, they couldn't muster enough numbers to force what we call a division or block voting. So the budget was passed by voice. The opposition, not enough of them stood up for the speaker to call for an actual vote. So it was passed by voice. This is somewhat embarrassing for the opposition, and people are asking the opposition MPs now for an explanation. The press are pressing them for statements and explanations of how this came to be. So all in all, a good win for Muhyiddin, but Muhyiddin's not out of the woods yet. If he's going to celebrate today, he's celebrating in the middle of a minefield because his coalition is still weak. It's still at 112 MPs out of the 220 in Parliament right now. Anything can happen. And in fact, over this next 3 weeks, I'd say that you would still have to watch the situation pretty closely. For Malaysians, we are in a situation now where there was a lot of uncertainty about whether Muhyiddin will continue to be Prime Minister after this, whether the government would still be there. It will be for now. So what we have is less uncertainty, but the same amount of instability. Anything can happen, could happen if the Muhyiddin government doesn't keep his guard up.
Meanwhile, still on Malaysia, the country has imposed mandatory COVID-19 screening for 1.7 million foreign workers. This follows a surge of infections in Selangor dormitories and factories run by the world's largest producer of rubber gloves. Senior Minister Ismail Sabri Yaakob said the first phase of screening will be carried out in states including Selangor and Penang. From today, authorities will also impose a fine of 50,000 ringgit per worker if employers house their foreign staff in crowded spaces. Elsewhere, the number of COVID-19 cases is rising in Asia. In South Korea, the situation is worsening with 583 new cases confirmed today. This is the highest since March as the country grapples with a third wave of infections that appears to be worsening despite tough new social distancing measures. South Korea has relied on mobile phone data, credit card records and closed-circuit television footage to track transmissions. But the new wave presents a challenge as many small clusters are happening in vastly different locations. Since Tuesday, restrictions on social gatherings have been tightened in Seoul and Greater Seoul. Meanwhile, Hong Kong is seeing a resurgence of COVID-19. An expert who spoke to the Straits Times believes the fourth wave arrived soon after the third ebbed in early September, as measures were eased then before local transmission was eliminated. The city reported 80 new cases today. Joining me now to share more on the situation in Hong Kong and South Korea respectively are the Straits Times' Hong Kong correspondent Claire Huang and South Korea correspondent Chang Mei Chun. For a start, could you briefly tell us what is the cause of the new waves? Let's start with you, Claire.
Well, it's a combination of local transmission within the community that was not completely eliminated after the third wave that sort of tapered off in September. The rules were then eased quite soon, you know. And of course, there was October festivities, so there was a lot of social interaction and mingling. So all these, put together is quite a potent recipe.
Right. And is South Korea seeing a similar situation, Mei Chun?
Yes. So we've had the second, this is called the third wave, and this is expected to be the worst and the toughest to curb because right now we're seeing many small clusters of infections all around, all throughout the country. Whereas the first wave, it was mostly in Daegu, and the second wave was mainly in Seoul, and both were traced back to one big main cluster, both church clusters. So in this case, in the church cluster, the government was able to do aggressive contact tracing to get a list of all the people in the church and preemptively call them up and get them to go for testing. That's why they were able to curb the spread. But in this case, the investigations are not catching up with the clusters that are happening everywhere. So you've got people who are going to golf, and then there'll be a cluster there. You've got people who meet friends, university friends going out, and then there's a cluster there. There are people going to church, there's a cluster. There are people go to sauna, and we have 2 sauna clusters right now. And then people going to aerobics class, people going to, even in work, Samsung has got a cluster, LG is starting one. We've got music class. It's just everywhere. So the authorities are finding it very difficult to contact trace right now. What was successful back then in the first 2 waves is somehow not working this time. So the cases we have today is the highest in 8 months, 583 new cases today.
Right. On that note, while countries are trying to contain the virus spread by curbing activities, it's also not economically viable to remain shut. So Claire, what is Hong Kong's strategy, so to speak, in opening up?
Well, I think opening up is not quite the right term. I say that because Hong Kong is one of the cities that has not yet undergone a lockdown, and that's unlike Singapore, of course. And if Chief Executive Carrie Lam's words are anything to go by, so she said yesterday that lockdown is not on the cards, but that's different from what the experts are now saying, because she revealed that she wants a target of 0 local transmissions. And to do that, you need to have strict rules, possibly even lockdowns. So the latest measures now are, basically forcing bars, pubs, nightclubs, party rooms, and saunas to shut from today until December 2. And then you have the bars and pubs are clearly unhappy because they're saying that the clusters that we are seeing now are mostly to do with the dance clubs. Dance clubs are, like a mix of dance studios and party rooms. The Thais go there to dance, and you can have food and drink, so mask off, right? So the bars and pubs are upset because up to about 1,000, half of the 1,400 licensed bars and pubs may have to fold if this situation prolongs. Also, you've got larger restaurants. Why do I say larger restaurants? Because they hold banquets for festivities, Christmas, things like that. And if they're not allowed to hold banquets, now it's capped at 40 people in a banquet. I mean, that's going to make things very hard. In terms of tourism, though, there's a little bit of a respite, I guess, in that sense, because Mrs. Lam announced on Wednesday that the tourism sector will get funds of 600 Hong Kong million dollars because it's the hardest hit.
Right. What about South Korea, Mei Chun? Because I understand that the country also has not used lockdown as a measure to contain the virus.
That's correct. From the beginning, South Korea has maintained that it will not resort to lockdown. What it does is it chases after the virus to try to curb the spread. But right now, what's happening is that we are seeing waves. And these waves are happening because you have social distancing, right? So the levels are intensified. They are raised when the virus situation gets bad. And then because of economic considerations, they tend to ease it at the most fastest time possible. And then when the social distancing is eased, what happens is people think that it's safe to go out, right? They think it's, you've been tired of not going out. You want to go out and enjoy, autumn. Everyone goes out to enjoy autumn leaves. So the thing is, when this happens, you raise, people stay at home. When you lower back to level 1, people go out. And when people go out, what do, right? They drink. They have meals, and when you do things like that, you remove your mask. Yeah. And because the government keeps saying that, avoid big gatherings, so people started to have small gatherings. And what's happening now is it's starting to spread at all these small gatherings because people let their guard down, I know everyone here, so there's no need to wear a mask, right? So this is leading to this latest 3rd wave, and this is very serious because South Korea is going to have its college entrance exam next week on December 3rd. And this exam is a make it or break it for students aged 19, the last year of high school.
Yeah.
So the government is appealing to everyone to, like, not go out this weekend. Please stay at home. They're also telling the students who are, like, in the last leg of the preparations for the exam, to not go to tuition centers, because tuition centers have become a cluster.
Mm.
So you can see, like, this vicious cycle is happening over and over again, and that, I think, is the reason why South Korea has not been able to contain the virus. um and until they can actually bring the cases down and then
Mm.
maintain consistently, I don't think you can think about opening up the borders.
Right. Now, Mei-Chun, Claire, Singapore is preparing to enter phase 3 of its safe reopening, but the authorities have said that to do so, we need to fulfill certain criteria, including keeping local case numbers low and capitalizing on technology to boost contact tracing efforts. Taking in what experts have told you about the situation in Hong Kong, what lessons can be drawn, you think, for Singapore in our bid to resume more activities, Claire?
Well, I've said it before on this show, actually, and I'll say it again. Now, people in Hong Kong operate on a DIY basis. What do I mean by that? I mean that they do it themselves. The government is not very prescriptive. And so, even if before the government gets very prescriptive, when the numbers go up, people are very aware here. They will avoid going out. You see less crowded streets. That's not to say that there's no fatigue. I think right now we have fatigue, which is why in October the numbers went up, because there was a lot of socializing. People are tired of staying away. So, there's a ground-up approach which stems from the environment here, right? As opposed to a compliant population back home where people only act when the government instructs. So from Hong Kong's experience, the government is very reactionary. So then it lies on the individual. And things like good hygiene, wearing masks, less mingling, and if you're sick, see a doctor. A good point that the respiratory expert, Dr. Leong Chi-Chiu, made when I spoke with him was that any activity can spark off local spread. And like Mei-Chun said, she was talking about how you have clusters everywhere. And that's exactly his point. He's saying that, he basically urged the Hong Kong government to impose restrictions on a wide range of activities. Why? Because, it's not, now we have the dance club cluster, but dancing is not the only activity that can spark off a cluster, playing mahjong, they like to do that here, mahjong clubs. Going to party rooms, which is now why they banned party rooms, because people here were going to hotel rooms, staycations, right? And then they were holding gatherings in party rooms and things like that. So he's saying that you need to impose a wide range of restrictions, that will cover activities which will then in turn cover the entire population. Things like face-to-face classes, out of the window, working in the office, maybe they can work from home instead, non-essential or religious, recreational activities, weddings, that kind of thing.
All right. Mei-Chun, your thoughts, lessons that we can learn from the situation in South Korea?
Okay, experts are now saying that the government's measures were not effective to begin with, and that they eased the social distancing too fast because of economic concerns, and that's why you have this, like, yo-yoing wave of infections. So I think it's better to be safe than to be sorry, and that even if it's hard, to bear with not going out, staying at home. It's better to be safe than to be sorry. And over here, one more thing that we have that Singapore doesn't have is winter. So during winter, the reason why experts are so afraid that this would become the worst wave is that winter limits people's activities outside. You tend to go, you tend to stay indoors, and then when you stay indoors, you are in a place where there is very bad ventilation. You don't open the windows because it's cold, right? You're letting cold air in. But the thing is, an environment like that allows virus to thrive, and And imagine going to the gym and then it's all underground, and then windows are not open. You sweat, you dance aerobics or Zumba or whatever, and then you spread the virus. So I would think avoid indoor places. Um, try not to meet your friends too often. Now they are suggesting that meetings should be kept under 15 minutes. And increasingly, I see people when they meet at coffee shops. Right now, they're not. Coffee shops the cafes are only allowing delivery and takeouts. But before the social distancing was raised, I see people hanging out at coffee shops. And if they're not drinking, the mask is on. So that is one way really to keep yourself safe.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Claire and Mei Chun, for setting aside time to come onto the show to share more on the situation in Hong Kong and South Korea. That was the Straits Times' Hong Kong correspondent Claire Huang and South Korea correspondent Chang Mei Chun. You can read their stories on straitstimes.com. Elsewhere in the region, Thailand recorded its first tourists last month since a ban in April to avoid the coronavirus outbreak. But just 1,200 travelers visited the Land of Smiles, a fraction of the 3.07 million arrivals in the same month last year. Thailand plans to restart talks with China on a travel bubble, but the country has yet to agree to any arrangements. The Philippines will sign an agreement tomorrow to buy 2 million doses of Covid-19 vaccine from AstraZeneca. The government aims to vaccinate as many as 30 million people a year to achieve immunity among 75% of the population. In sports news, 3 days of national mourning have begun in Argentina after the death of football legend Diego Maradona, who suffered a heart attack less than a month after his 60th birthday. Maradona's greatest achievement came at the 1986 World Cup when he led his country to victory and scored his most famous goal against England in the quarter-final, which was simply magical.
Maradona brilliantly just gets away from Reed and now motors up through the gears, and he's beaten Butcher and he's beaten Fennick. It's Diego Maradona and it is quite magnificent.
Now it's Thursday, which means one thing, a check-in with our colleagues at Live for ideas on what to do over the weekend. Let's begin with Singapore's favorite topic, food, and even more food. Now I have food editor Tan Sha-Yun with me now to share more. Xue, you have two selections for us today, Botanico and Lolla. But before we get to that, I noticed that you are at Golden Mile?
My work takes me places, and I just did an interview here, and I'm so excited about this story, and I would love to come and tell you about it when it's out. Will you ask me back?
Yes, I will do that. Okay, and Xue, let's talk about our two restaurants, because one of them, you talked about the place as well, the ambience of the place, and that is Botanico. Tell us more about that.
So Botanico is a restaurant in a part of the Botanic Gardens that you probably would never have been to. It's in Cluny Park Road, and it's such a chill place, really. It's an old Art Deco bungalow, and Botanico takes the top floor, and then on the ground floor is a cafe called the Bee's Knees, and a wonderful Singaporean chef. She's Chinese-Indian or Indian-Chinese, and her name is Sujata Asokan, and she runs both places. And her food is excellent.
Now, talking about the food, let's focus on it, because you wrote as well that the chef has a way of taking local dishes and putting a new spin to it.
She's very influenced by the cross-cultural kind of meals that she used to have. Something like herbal chicken. Her herbal chicken is not just herbal, it's a bit chicken rice kind of inspired as well. The only objection I have to that dish is that she uses chicken breast, which is like the least interesting chicken part as far as I'm concerned. But other than that, it's a beautiful kind of melding of Chinese herbs together with that chicken rice. And then she also does wonderful things with rojak. And she also does a very nice beef tongue taco, except that instead of like a regular tortilla, she uses bok choy, baby bok choy, and they're so cheap. and the beef tongue is just gorgeous. And it comes with this bangkwang salad, which is it has so many layers of like crunch and textures and flavors, and it's just beautiful. The food is excellent.
Now, Shwe, your other food pick for this weekend is Lolla. And you shared with me before the interview as we were talking that the chef has a particular way of preparing the beef. What's so special about that?
So I think it starts with sourcing, and Lolla is very good at sourcing good quality and produce which are in season. So the two dishes that I enjoyed the most at Lolla actually happen to meet with beef, and it's a particular cut of it's the tri-tip. So this is Mayura full blood Wagyu tri-tip from Australia, and tri-tip is from the bottom of the sirloin, and it's called a tri-tip because it's kind of like a triangular piece of meat. And what's interesting is that the grain of the meat changes halfway through, so you have to slice it in a certain way to keep it tender. So Chef Joanne, she has a really good touch with the beef. So I had it in two ways. The first was beef tartare, and so she uses and it's so the meat is so sweet and juicy and flavorful that you don't even really need the oyster aioli, although the oyster aioli is really quite good as well. And she uses a Jerusalem artichoke chip. It's so good. It's like this earthy flavor that goes really well with the raw beef. And then the other dish that I really enjoyed was the seared tri-tip. So she heats the beef at 58 degrees for 15 hours. Then there's a hot sear, and then when you eat the beef, right, there's this crackle on the surface of the meat, and then you bite into it, and then there are veins of fat running through the meat, and the veins of fat crackle as well. It's so magical.
Sounds really yummy. Well, thank you so much, Shwe, for coming onto the show. That was food editor Tan Shui Yin on her food picks for this weekend, Botanico and Lolla. Now, we have no plans for this weekend and have decided to stay in and watch the telly. We have shows to recommend. Let's bring in journalist Jen Lee. Now, Jen, you have two shows to recommend this weekend. Let's begin with the first one, which is premiering today on HBO Go, The Flight Attendant. What is it about and what are the reviews saying so far?
So it's a dark comedic thriller starring Katie Cuoco, which people remember from The Big Bang Theory, Penny. She plays like a cabin attendant, right? A flight attendant. And she wakes up in bed with a dead man, and she cannot remember what happened. So she wakes up in Bangkok, and she had this fun night out with this cute guy, and she likes him, and then she wakes up and he's dead. So it basically starts off from there. The reviews so far are pretty strong, saying that Katie Cuoco put up a pretty good performance, and that the series, because it's although the subject matter is a bit dark, it is a bit of a comedy. So there's they say it's quite lighthearted, quite fast-paced, and quite interesting to watch unfold. And I think Kaylee Cuoco in this plays a bit of a hot mess. She has all these problems. She drinks too much, she parties too much, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Right. Now, you've got me at the waking up dead beside a man. That is intriguing. I want to find out what happens, right? Well, your second pick is not new and it's already streaming on Netflix. Tell us more about that.
Yes, so this is like a little Netflix gem that I discovered, and I'm very excited to tell people about it. It's called Deaf You. So it's about it's a reality TV series, and it's about a group of deaf and hard of hearing college students who attend this university, which I find it very hard to pronounce. It's Gallaudet, I think. It's a private university for the education of the deaf and hard of hearing that is in Washington, D.C. in the United States. So it has all the reality TV elements. So it has the gossipy, who slept with who backstabbed who, frenemies, that kind of stuff. So it has that part, but at the same time, it's a very interesting look at the deaf community, and it really is a very enlightening look, because it's it's like the daily realities of people who are deaf and hard of hearing. So firstly, there's like varying degrees of deaf. So some people can maybe hear in 1 year. Some people, may have been deaf since birth. It's just always been this reality. Some people may have been deaf after an accident or an incident, and so on. So there's also like debates within the deaf community where like some people feel like, you shouldn't speak too much, because some of them can speak. Then they'll say like you shouldn't speak too much. Then you're like forgetting the deaf culture of signing, of using ASL. And then there's like this YouTuber who does videos about her deafness, but some of her classmates feel like you are catering too much to the hearing community. So it's actually very interesting. And even just small things like when they sit at a table, they don't like it when there's something on the table, like a vase or like a bottle of water, because they feel like that's not helpful to them signing to each other and seeing each other's like their mouths move for lip reading and so on. So it's actually very interesting. And I think the funniest part was they have signs for names. So like your own name, or like names that you refer to a lot. So they actually have signs for Trump, like Donald Trump, the president. So I think you can tell who's a Trump supporter and who's not, because if they're not a Trump supporter, they use a sign that's like a bit rude. They use a sign for a toupee, like the fake hair. Yeah, I thought that was quite funny.
So there you have it, 2 shows, The Flight Attendant on HBO Go and Deaf You on Netflix to watch over the weekend as recommended by journalist Jan Lee. And lastly, school's out, the holidays are upon us, and we're just days away from redeeming the $100 worth of Singapore Rediscovers vouchers on December 1st. So how can we make full use of the vouchers? Well, travel editor Lee Siu Hua joins me now to share with us on where we can find activities to do here in Singapore this year-end holiday. Now, Siu Hua, my friends and I, we usually end up doing the same activities whenever we meet up. The Straits Times recently launched the SG Go Where website, a hyper-local guide to discover Singapore. How different is this guide compared to the ones that are out there?
So we have our Straits Times journalists going out there to experience all these activities. And I've asked them to be, to be lively, to have a point of view, and really to go out there to have fun themselves. So that fun and that possibility is conveyed in the stories. So whether it is our colleague John Louis staying in a shipping container, or making masks in the factory, or we go higher end for luxe vacations, all of them would have experienced all these genres of domestic travel. And I'll also say there are a couple of fresh elements. We have videos, we have multimedia moments to accompany many of those stories. And because we are a newspaper, it is very easy and complete for us to pull out news stories written by our colleagues across the newsroom.
Now, Siu Hua, as this travel editor, you share your overseas traveling experiences with the readers in your pieces, but now, you're unable to do so due to the pandemic. How have you then repurposed your travel columns to suit the current situation?
When the pandemic broke out, we just found a new opportunity. So, many of our journalists are world explorers, just like Singaporeans, and they simply, while exploring the 4 corners of the world, I guess we didn't really take as much time to explore the 4 corners of Singapore, but now we're doing it, and it's across all the different dimensions, right? So we have launched at least 3 new series in recent weeks and months. One of them is the Sweet Life Staycation series. So from the fancy staycations to chic hotels under $100 that perfectly match the $100 tourism vouchers. We have done that. So we go with a checklist, like looking at the bathroom and also exploring the neighborhood. We decide whether this is a good escape or not. And these staycation reviews that appear weekly, and we usually limit ourselves to a 24-hour stay, which really focuses our minds a lot when we write about the staycations. So they're all lodged in SG Go Web. Another one is Eating Air, cool local tours. So this includes these crazy rich Asians film locations. Since the movie was filmed in places like Chimes, MBS, Gardens by the Bay, and finally our newest series it's called A Day Away. So it's essentially experiencing another country in Singapore. We already had A Day Away in Taiwan, and next week we'll have A Day Away in Japan. And our travel pages never really had to shut down, even though borders have been closed. We have thought about all these ideas, where to escape, where to go. And just like, I guess we spend lots of fun time at, quality time bonding with the families at home. It's also the same when we go out there in Singapore, exploring it afresh with family and friends.
Thank you, Siu Hua, for the sharing. I've been speaking to travel editor Lee Siu Hua on ST's recently launched SG Go website, a hyper-local guide to discover Singapore. And those are some ideas to spend the weekend. The Friday section in tomorrow's paper will have even more suggestions, so keep an eye out for that. Now, those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com, and remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below. Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman. Join us tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.